You tried to help. You offered your hand, suggested a doctor, wanted to take them to the hospital, tried to solve a practical problem, and the answer was no. Dry, firm, sometimes curt, and you were left not understanding what happened. What I'm about to explain will completely change how you interpret this behavior. Refusal to help elderly people is one of the behaviors that generates the most conflict in families and is one of the most misinterpreted. The family sees stubbornness. They see irresponsibility. They see an elderly person putting themselves at risk out of pride. But what is happening inside is more complex, more rational, and more human than this superficial reading allows one to see. This video will give you 10 different perspectives to understand why the elderly refuse help and what you can do differently so that they accept the support they need without it generating conflict or alienation. The first thing that comes into play when an elderly person refuses help is identity. For decades, that person was the father who solves problems, the mother who cares, the professional who delivers. Autonomy was at the core of their identity. They were the one who helped, not the one who was helped. Accepting help, especially from children, is a role reversal that the psychological system faces with enormous resistance. It's not irrationality, it's self-preservation. Accepting that you need help walking, cooking, or remembering your medication is, for many elderly people, equivalent to declaring that the version of themselves they built over decades no longer exists. This threat to identity is real and intense. And the refusal of help is, above all, an attempt to keep cohesive this identity that feels fragmented. The elderly person is not being irresponsible with their own health. They are trying to survive psychologically in the only way they know how. The way help is offered largely determines whether it will be accepted or refused, and most families offer help in a way that unintentionally sends the wrong message. When a son comes home and says, "Dad, you shouldn't be doing this alone anymore," what the father hears isn't care. It's a judgment of his ability. It's a signal that someone from the outside has decided he's no longer capable. And nobody takes well to having their abilities judged, especially by someone they raised. When family members make decisions about an elderly person's life without consulting them, when they call the doctor without warning, when they rearrange furniture for safety reasons, when they decide that the elderly person should no longer drive without having a real conversation, each of these actions communicates. You no longer have control over your own life. The subsequent refusal to help is not irrational. It is the only form of agency left. Subscribe to the channel now. Here we talk about what's underlying the behavior of older adults in a way you won't find anywhere else. There's a paradox that few people know about. The elderly person who refuses to go to the doctor often isn't denying that they might be ill. They're afraid to confirm that they are. Until he goes to the doctor, the illness exists only as a possibility. It could be nothing. It could be serious. But until there's a diagnosis, there's ambiguity. And ambiguity is preferable to the certainty of something he fears. Accepting help to go to the doctor is accepting that the uncertainty will end. And for many elderly people, especially those who have already lost spouses or friends to serious illnesses, the certainty of a bad diagnosis is more terrifying than the possibility of any diagnosis at all. This isn't irrational thinking. It's the psychology of threat at work, and approaching it with, "You need to go, it could be serious," reinforces exactly the fear that's causing the refusal. The approach that works is the opposite, communicating safety, continuity, presence, regardless of the outcome. Let's go together, and whatever we discover, we'll solve it together. Sometimes the elderly person refuses specific help because they need something else that isn't being offered. They refuse to go to the doctor, but what's missing isn't a doctor. It's someone to ask how they're feeling. They refuse the caregiver the family wants to hire, but what they're refusing isn't the caregiver themselves. It's the feeling of being replaced in their children's affection by someone who pays to be there. Refusal of help is sometimes the available language for saying things that the elderly person cannot say directly. I want you, not a caregiver. I want you to find out what's wrong, not for me to be a clinical case to solve. I want to participate in the decision, not be the object of the decision. Before concluding that the elderly person is being stubborn, it's worth asking, what exactly are they refusing, and what might be underlying this refusal that hasn't yet been named? Leave a like on this video. It signals to the algorithm that this content is relevant, and it reaches more people who need this information. Today's elderly grew up in a culture where decency and dignity were closely linked to the ability to fend for oneself. Asking for help in many of these generations was synonymous with failure. It meant being the weak one, the pitiful one, the one who can't manage. When family members offer help in a very insistent way, especially in public or in front of other family members, or with a tone that, even unintentionally, sounds like a demand or a condescension, the elderly person feels something very specific: humiliation. It's not the same humiliation a young person would feel. It's a humiliation burdened by decades of building a self-image. A single moment of being treated as incapable can erase in that instant a lifetime of accumulated dignity. So the refusal isn't a refusal to help. It's a refusal to humiliate. And the solution isn't to insist. It isn't to argue with data about his safety. It's to change the approach, to offer help in a way that preserves his dignity and gives him some control over how and when to accept it. There are documented strategies that significantly increase the rate at which older adults accept help without generating conflict or alienation. The first is help disguised as partnership. Instead of "I'll do this for you," it's "help me with this, we'll do it together." This keeps the elderly person as an active participant, not a passive recipient. The psychological difference is enormous. The second is to give choice based on necessity. Instead of "you're going to the doctor on Friday," ask, "do you prefer to go on Thursday or Friday?" This maintains a sense of control over one's own life within a decision that needs to happen anyway. The third tip is to start small. Don't arrive with a list of necessary changes. Begin with something small that he can accept without feeling like he's giving up total control. When he accepts the small thing, the level of resistance to the bigger ones gradually decreases. The fourth is to ask questions instead of making statements. Instead of "you're not doing well alone," ask, "how are you feeling about your current routine?" A question invites reflection. A statement invites defensiveness. Share this video with your family, especially with anyone struggling with an elderly person who refuses help. This perspective could unlock a situation that has been stuck for a long time. There is extensive research on what happens to older adults who lose control over their own lives, and the results are consistent and impactful. A classic study by Judith Rodin and Ellen Langer in nursing homes showed that those who were given greater autonomy over small everyday decisions, such as which plants to water, which movie to watch, and what time to schedule activities, exhibited significantly better mood, more physical activity, fewer illnesses, and lower mortality than the control group. Autonomy is not an emotional luxury for the elderly. It is a measurable factor in physical health. Seniors who feel they have control over their lives have stronger immune systems, more stable blood pressure, less circulating cortisol, and better cognitive function. So when a family takes away an elderly person's autonomy for their own good, they are doing the opposite of what is good in a literally physiological way. Preserving as much autonomy as possible, even when the risk is greater than we would like, is a form of care that saves lives in a way that excessive protection does not. There comes a point when the refusal of help ceases to be psychological and becomes a neurological symptom. This happens when the elderly person categorically denies objectively evident problems, when they fail to recognize their own limitations in a way that goes beyond emotional resistance, and when the refusal is accompanied by confusion about what is happening around them. Anosognosia is a neurological condition where a person is genuinely unaware of their own deficits. They are not lying. They are not in psychological denial. The brain, for neurological reasons, is not processing the information that there is a problem. This is more common in Alzheimer's and some forms of dementia, and it's one of the most difficult aspects for families to deal with because it seems like the elderly person is being deliberately stubborn when in fact the refusal is a symptom of a brain disease. Distinguishing between psychological and neurological refusal requires professional assessment. But a guiding sign is consistency. Neurological refusal tends to be more absolute, more disconnected from reality, and resistant to any approach, while psychological refusal has nuances, moments of openness, and responds to how the conversation is conducted. Sometimes you try everything. You change the way you offer help. You give them autonomy. You start small. You ask questions, and yet the elderly person consistently refuses any and all help. What to do in this case? First, document. When the situation involves a real risk to health or safety and the elderly person persistently refuses help, the family needs a clear record of the situation's dates and behaviors. This is necessary if a more formal intervention is eventually needed. Second, seek allies. Sometimes the elderly person refuses help from family, but accepts it from a close friend, a pastor, or a trusted doctor. Identifying who has credibility with that elderly person and involving that person in the conversation can unlock what seems impossible. Third, accepting limitations. Adults have the right to make decisions about their own lives, including decisions that others consider wrong. An elderly person who refuses treatment for a non-urgent condition is exercising autonomy. The family can express concern, can make it clear that they are available, but they cannot replace the elderly person's will with their own without established cognitive impairment. Accepting this limitation is not abandonment. It is respect for the whole person, someone who lived decades before you and has the right to live the remaining years on their own terms. Refusal of help is rarely the problem itself. It's a symptom of a deeper issue, an elderly person who doesn't feel safe enough to be vulnerable, who has been taught their whole life that needing help is a failure, who feels that accepting support means losing who they are. The solution isn't about convincing more, arguing better, or presenting more facts. The solution lies in creating a relationship where accepting help doesn't threaten who he is, where vulnerability isn't a sign of defeat, where being cared for doesn't erase decades of strength. This isn't created in one conversation. It's created in hundreds of small interactions where the message is consistent. You are still you. You still have value. You still have control. You still have a voice. And I'm here not to replace who you are, but to walk alongside you as things change. When this message is lived, not just spoken, resistance falls away. Not because the elderly person has given up, because they finally felt safe enough to land. If this video changed anything about how you see this situation, leave a like and subscribe to keep up with these topics that make a real difference in the relationships that matter most.